The blood on Rebecca Vance's hands had long since dried by the time she stumbled into Fort Worth, Texas, but she could still feel it staining her soul like ink that would never wash clean. She had killed her husband in self-defense 3 nights ago, watched him bleed out on the kitchen floor of their homestead, while he cursed her with his final breath. And now she walked into a town where nobody knew her name or her crime, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart so shattered she wasn't sure all the pieces still existed. It was late August in 1878, and the heat pressed down on Fort Worth like a physical weight, making the air shimmer above the dusty streets where cattle drivers and merchants conducted their business, with the casual efficiency of men who had learned to thrive in harsh conditions. Rebecca stood at the edge of town, her dark hair tangled and full of prairie dust, her green eyes hollow with exhaustion, and something deeper than mere tiredness. She had walked for 3 days straight, avoiding the main roads, sleeping in ditches and behind rock formations, driven by a terror so profound it had become her only companion. She didn't know how to start over. The thought circled in her mind like a vulture waiting for something to die. She was 24 years old, and her entire adult life had been defined by the man she had married at 18, a man who had seemed charming during their brief courtship, but who had revealed himself to be a monster once the vows were spoken. 6 years of hell, 6 years of bruises hidden beneath long sleeves and smiles that never reached her eyes. 6 years of walking on eggshells and praying that each night would be better than the last. And then, 3 nights ago, when he had come at her with the fire poker raised high and murder in his bloodshot eyes, something inside her had finally broken free. She had grabbed the hunting knife from the counter, and when he lunged, she had defended herself with a desperation that came from knowing it was her life, or his. The blade had found his chest, and he had staggered backward, surprise replacing rage on his face as he crumpled to the floor. She had run, not because she was guilty of murder, she knew that much, but because she also knew that the law didn't always see things clearly when it came to dead husbands and living wives. She had run because she was terrified and alone and had nowhere else to go, and running was the only thing her body knew how to do after years of fleeing from room to room, trying to escape fists and fury. Fort Worth stretched before her now, a town that had grown rapidly with the arrival of the railroad and the cattle trade, full of saloons and general stores, boarding houses and banks, churches and gambling halls, all existing in the peculiar harmony of frontier life. Rebecca forced her legs to move forward, each step an act of will. She needed water first, then food, then some kind of plan that extended beyond the next 5 minutes. The first building she came to was a general store with a wooden sign that read, "Henderson's Mercantile." A woman stood outside sweeping the porch, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face weathered by decades under the Texas sun. She looked up as Rebecca approached, and whatever she saw in the younger woman's face made her stop sweeping. "You look like you've been through hell and back, girl," the woman said, her voice gruff, but not unkind. Rebecca's throat was so dry she could barely speak. "Water," she managed. The woman nodded once and disappeared inside, returning moments later with a tin cup full of water from the pump around back. Rebecca drank it so fast she choked, coughing and sputtering, but the woman just waited patiently and refilled the cup when Rebecca handed it back. The second cup she drank more slowly, feeling the life seep back into her body one swallow at a time. "Thank you," Rebecca said, her voice still rough. "You running from something? Or toward something?" the woman asked bluntly. Rebecca hesitated. "Both. Neither. I don't know." "That's honest, at least." The woman studied her for a long moment. "I'm Martha Henderson. My husband and I run this store. We might have some work if you're looking, nothing fancy, just stocking shelves and helping customers. Pay isn't much, but it comes with a room upstairs and 2 meals a day." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected kindness. "I don't have any money to pay for lodging while I work." "Did I ask for money?" Martha's expression softened slightly. "Look, I've been where you are. Maybe not the exact same place, but close enough. Sometimes a woman just needs a chance to catch her breath. You want the job or not?" "Yes," Rebecca said, the word tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. "Yes, please. I'll work hard, I promise." "I expect you will. Come on inside and we'll get you settled. What's your name?" "Rebecca Vance." She used her maiden name automatically. not wanting any connection to the surname of the man she had left bleeding on the floor of their homestead. Martha led her into the store, which smelled of leather and tobacco, coffee and new fabric, all the sense of civilization that Rebecca had almost forgotten existed. The shelves were neatly organized, stocked with everything from canned goods to farming equipment, bolts of cloth to ammunition. A man stood behind the counter, thin and balding, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "George, this is Rebecca. She's going to be helping us out," Martha announced. George Henderson looked Rebecca over, with the same assessing gaze his wife had used, but he simply nodded. "Welcome. Martha will show you where everything is." The room upstairs was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. Rebecca stood in the doorway, afraid to step inside, afraid that if she did, this fragile moment of grace would shatter like glass. "Go on," Martha said gently. "It's yours. There's a bathing room down the hall, and I'll bring up some clean clothes that should fit well enough. You look about my size from when I was younger. Supper is at 6. Then Martha was gone, and Rebecca was alone in a room that represented the first safe space she had known in years. She closed the door, walked slowly to the bed, and sat down on the edge of the mattress. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She wrapped her arms around herself and rocked back and forth, trying to hold together all the pieces that wanted to fly apart. She didn't know how to start over. She didn't know how to be a person instead of a target. She didn't know how to sleep without one eye open, or how to move through a room without calculating exit routes. She didn't know how to trust that this kindness was real, or how to believe she deserved it. But she was here, and she was alive. And for now, that would have to be enough. The first week passed in a blur of learning and exhaustion. Rebecca threw herself into the work at Henderson's Mercantile with a single-minded focus that made both Martha and George exchange concerned glances behind her back. She organized shelves with military precision, helped customers with an earnest politeness that seemed to surprise the rough men and frontier women who came through the door, and volunteered for every task, no matter how menial. She was trying to make herself indispensable, Martha realized, trying to ensure she wouldn't be cast out. It broke Martha's heart a little more each day. "You can slow down, you know," Martha told her on the 5th day, finding Rebecca scrubbing the already clean floor long after the store had closed. "We're not going to throw you out if you take a breath." Rebecca looked up, her face flushed from exertion. "I just want to earn my keep." "You've earned it 3 times over already. Come on, put the brush down. There's stew on the stove, and you look like you're about to collapse." It was during supper that evening, sitting at the small table in the living quarters behind the store, that Martha asked the question Rebecca had been dreading. "What are you running from, Rebecca?" Rebecca's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, her appetite vanishing. "I can't talk about it. Can't or won't. Both." Martha reached across the table and covered Rebecca's hand with her own. "I'm not trying to pry, but I've seen that look in a woman's eyes before. My sister had that same look before her husband beat her so badly she never woke up. That was 30 years ago, and I still see her face sometimes when I close my eyes." Rebecca's breath caught in her chest. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for things you didn't do, but I need you to understand something. If someone's coming after you, if there's danger following you here, George and I need to know. Not because we'll turn you away, but because we'll want to be prepared." The tears Rebecca had been holding back for days finally spilled over. "I killed him," she whispered. "My husband. He tried to kill me first. He was going to do it this time. I could see it in his eyes, but I killed him. I left him there, and I ran, and I don't know if anyone's looking for me, but I couldn't stay. I couldn't." Martha's expression didn't change, didn't show shock or horror or judgment. She just squeezed Rebecca's hand tighter. "Then you did what you had to do to survive. That's not murder, girl. That's justice. The law might not see it that way. The law is written by men who've never had to fear for their lives in their own homes. But you're here now, and you're safe, and that's what matters. We'll deal with whatever comes, if it comes." Rebecca wiped her eyes with her free hand. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't know me. Because someone should have been kind to my sister. Because you deserve better than what you've been given. Because that's what decent people do." Martha released Rebecca's hand and picked up her spoon again. "Now eat your stew before it gets cold. You need your strength." It was the following Saturday when Rebecca first saw the cowboy who would change everything. The store was busy, full of ranch hands and cowboys who had come into town for supplies and entertainment after long weeks on the range. Rebecca was behind the counter, carefully measuring out flour for a customer, when the door opened and he walked in. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man who spent his life doing hard physical labor. His face was tanned and weathered, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, the color of storm clouds, and they moved around the store with the alert awareness of someone accustomed to potential danger. He wore typical cowboy attire, dusty jeans and a worn shirt, a leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the revolver looking well used but well maintained. But it wasn't his appearance that caught Rebecca's attention. It was the way he carried himself. There was a quiet confidence in his movements, a self-possession that didn't require announcement or aggression. He nodded politely to the other customers, removed his hat when he entered, and waited his turn with patient courtesy that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. When he finally approached the counter, his eyes met Rebecca's, and she saw something flicker in them. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, though they had never met before. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that held traces of somewhere farther south, maybe Louisiana or Mississippi. "I need some supplies. Coffee, beans, bacon, ammunition for a Winchester, and some tobacco if you have it." Rebecca nodded, grateful for the straightforward request. "Of course. The tobacco is behind you on that shelf, and I'll gather the rest." As she moved around the store collecting his items, she was aware of him watching her, not in the way that made her skin crawl, not like the leering stares some of the men gave her, but with a quiet curiosity that made her self-conscious nonetheless. She kept her eyes down, focused on her task, and brought everything to the counter to tally up. "That'll be $3.40, she said. He pulled the money from his pocket and counted it out carefully, his hands rough and calloused, but surprisingly steady. As he handed her the coins, their fingers brushed, and Rebecca jerked back as if burned. The cowboy noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he didn't comment. "Thank you, madam," he said, gathering his supplies. He paused at the door, looked back at her once more, then left. "That's Tobias Hartwell," Martha said, appearing at Rebecca's elbow. "He works for the Circle H Ranch about 10 miles outside town. Good man, from what I hear. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's fair and honest. Been working that ranch for about 3 years now." Rebecca watched through the window as Tobias loaded his supplies into his saddlebags, his movements efficient and practiced. "Does he come in often?" "Once or twice a month, usually. Why?" "No reason, just curious." But that night, lying in her narrow bed, Rebecca found herself thinking about storm-colored eyes and the way he had said "madam" with such simple respect, as if she were a person worthy of courtesy instead of a thing to be used or discarded. She pushed the thoughts away, angry at herself for the weakness. She had no business thinking about any man, not after what she had survived, not when she was still looking over her shoulder every moment of every day. Yet the thoughts persisted, stubborn as weeds. Tobias Hartwell rode back to the Circle H Ranch as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold. The woman at the mercantile haunted his thoughts in a way that disturbed him. He had seen something in her green eyes, a wariness, a bone-deep fear that she tried to hide behind polite efficiency. It was the look of a hunted creature, and it called to something protective in him that he had thought long buried. He had his own ghosts, his own reasons for being in Texas instead of the Louisiana plantation where he had been born 28 years ago. The war had taken everything from his family, his father, their home, their way of life, and Tobias had spent the years since trying to find a place where the past couldn't reach him. He had worked as a cowboy, a ranch hand, a horse breaker, anything that kept him moving and kept him from putting down roots that could be torn up. But there was something about Fort Worth, about the Circle H Ranch and its owner, old Samuel Harrison, who treated his workers with fairness and respect, that had made Tobias stay longer than he usually did. 3 years now, the longest he had remained anywhere since the war ended. And now there was a woman with frightened eyes who flinched when a man's hand came too close. "You look troubled, son," Samuel said the evening as they sat on the porch of the main ranch house, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Samuel was in his 60s, a widower, who ran his ranch with the help of a dozen cowboys and treated them more like family than employees. Just thinking, Tobias said. About anything in particular? Tobias considered not answering, but Samuel had a way of drawing out confidences without seeming to try. There's a woman working at Henderson's Mercantile. New, I think. She looked like she was scared of her own shadow. Samuel nodded slowly. Martha mentioned they had hired someone. Said she showed up about a week ago looking like she'd walked through hell. Didn't say much more than that. It's not my business, Tobias said, but even as he spoke the words, he knew he didn't believe them. Maybe not, but I've known you long enough to recognize when something's gotten under your skin. You're a good man, Tobias. If your instincts are telling you something's wrong, they're probably right. Tobias didn't respond, just watched the stars and wondered why a woman he didn't know had managed to lodge herself in his thoughts so firmly in the space of a single conversation. The weeks passed, and Fort Worth settled into the rhythm of late summer. Rebecca grew more comfortable in her role at the Mercantile, though she never quite lost the tension that seemed to live in her shoulders. She learned the names of the regular customers, learned which ranchers were honest and which tried to haggle every purchase down to the penny. She learned that Martha snored loud enough to hear through the walls, and that George had a sweet tooth he tried unsuccessfully to hide from his wife. And she learned that Tobias Hartwell came to town every 2 weeks like clockwork, always polite, always purchasing roughly the same supplies, always with that same quiet regard in his storm-colored eyes. Their conversations remained brief and transactional, but something was building between them, a recognition, perhaps, of two souls who carried burdens they couldn't speak aloud. Rebecca found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. She had no business feeling anything for any man, she reminded herself sternly. She had no business hoping, but hope was a stubborn thing. It was mid-September when everything shifted. Rebecca was restocking shelves near the front of the store when 3 men rode into town and tied their horses outside the Mercantile. Something about them made her blood run cold, a recognition that bypassed rational thought and went straight to instinct. These were hard men, dangerous men, men who wore their violence like other people wore their clothes. They entered the store, and the lead man, thick-built with a scar running down his left cheek, looked around with the proprietary air of someone who believed everything he saw belonged to him. "Afternoon," Martha said from behind the counter, her voice carefully neutral. "What can I help you with?" "Looking for someone," the scarred man said. His voice was rough, grating. "Woman, about this tall." He held his hand up to indicate Rebecca's height. Dark hair, green eyes. Might be going by the name Rebecca Vance. Her husband died about a month ago under suspicious circumstances, and we're tracking her down to bring her back to stand before the law. Rebecca's heart stopped. The shelf she had been holding onto became the only thing keeping her upright. She was partially hidden behind a stack of crates, but if they came deeper into the store, if they looked around, they would see her. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description," Martha said, and her voice didn't waver even slightly. "Just me and my husband working here." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that? There's a reward for information leading to her capture. $500. $500. Rebecca's knees nearly buckled. That was a fortune, more than most people in Fort Worth would see in years. It was enough to tempt even good people into betrayal. "I'm sure," Martha said firmly. "Now, if you're not buying anything, I'd appreciate it if you moved along. You're blocking the door." The scarred man took a step forward, his hand drifting toward the gun at his hip. "Now that's not very friendly. Maybe we should take a look around, just to be certain." "That won't be necessary." The voice came from the doorway, and Rebecca's eyes widened as she saw Tobias Hartwell step into the store. He wasn't alone. 2 other cowboys flanked him, both of them from the Circle H ranch, both of them with their hands resting casually on their own guns. "And who might you be?" the scarred man asked, his tone turning ugly. "Just a customer, but I couldn't help overhearing that you're looking for someone." Tobias's voice was calm, conversational, but there was steel underneath it. "Mrs. Henderson told you she hasn't seen your person. In Texas, we tend to take people at their word, especially when they're respected members of the community. So, I reckon it's time for you and your friends to move along. This doesn't concern you, cowboy. Maybe not, but 3 armed men threatening a woman in her own store, that concerns me quite a bit. So let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be. You can leave peacefully, or we can escort you out. Your choice." The scarred man looked at Tobias, looked at his companions, then looked at the other customers in the store, who had stopped what they were doing and were watching the confrontation with hostile eyes. Fort Worth was a rough town, but it protected its own, and the Hendersons were well liked. "This isn't over," the scarred man said, but he was already backing toward the door. "We'll be asking around." "You do that?" Tobias said pleasantly. "I'm sure you'll get the same answer everywhere you go." The three men left, mounting their horses and riding down the main street with backward glances that promised trouble. Rebecca remained frozen behind the crates, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps that she couldn't control. "Rebecca!" Martha was suddenly beside her, hands on her shoulders. "Rebecca, breathe. They're gone. They're looking for me. They'll find me. They'll take me back." Rebecca's vision was starting to narrow, dark spots dancing at the edges. "Look at me." Tobias's voice cut through her panic, and she found herself staring into those storm-colored eyes. He had come around the counter and was kneeling in front of her, close but not touching, giving her space. "Look at me and breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. Again. You're safe. They're gone, and you're safe." Rebecca followed his instructions, focusing on his voice, on the steady calm in his eyes. Gradually, her breathing slowed, the panic receding enough for rational thought to return. "How did you know?" she whispered. "I didn't, but I saw them ride into town, and something about them set my teeth on edge, so I followed. Lucky timing." He glanced up at Martha. "Those men were bounty hunters?" "Or something like them," Martha confirmed. "Looking for Rebecca. Said her husband died under suspicious circumstances." "He tried to kill me," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "He was going to kill me, and I defended myself. But I ran instead of staying to explain, and now they'll never believe it was self-defense." Tobias was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Do you have anywhere else to go? Anyone who can vouch for you?" "No, I have no one. I'm alone." "Then you can't stay here. If those men are asking around, and with that kind of reward money involved, someone will eventually talk. Fort Worth isn't that big, and you're too visible working in the store." He seemed to come to a decision. "You need to leave town, at least for a while until things cool down." "And go where? I have no money, no horse, nothing." "You could come to the Circle H ranch," Tobias said slowly, working through the idea as he spoke. "We're always short on help, especially with cooking and mending and the like. Samuel Harrison, the owner, he's a good man. He'd take you on if I vouch for you, and the ranch is remote enough that those bounty hunters would have a hard time finding you, even if they suspected you were there." "Why would you help me?" Rebecca asked, bewildered. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're terrified. I know you're running from something that left marks on your soul, if not your skin. I know that woman who flinches when a man comes too close, has reasons for flinching." His eyes held hers. "And I know what it's like to be running from a past you can't escape. So let me help. Let us help." Rebecca looked at Martha, who nodded encouragingly. "Tobias is right. You'll be safer at the ranch than here in town, and if anyone asks, we'll say you moved on, headed west or north or wherever." "I don't know how to start over," Rebecca said, the words she had been thinking since she arrived in Fort Worth finally spoken aloud. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I was." Tobias stood and offered her his hand. "Then we'll figure it out one day at a time, together." Rebecca stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, this simple gesture of help from a man who owed her nothing. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his and let him help her to her feet. "Together," she repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign on her tongue, a concept she had forgotten existed. They left town an hour later, after Rebecca had gathered her few possessions, and Martha had pressed food and a warm coat into her arms, along with a fierce hug. Tobias had an extra horse, a gentle mare named Clover, and he helped Rebecca into the saddle with patient care, adjusting the stirrups and making sure she was comfortable before mounting his own horse. The ride to the Circle H ranch took nearly 3 hours, following a well-worn trail through rolling prairie dotted with mesquite and live oak. The sun was setting by the time they arrived, casting long shadows across the ranch buildings. The main house was a solid 2-story structure built from local stone and timber, surrounded by a handful of outbuildings, including a bunkhouse, a barn, several corrals, and a smokehouse. Samuel Harrison came out onto the porch as they approached, his weathered face creasing with curiosity. He was a tall man, though age had stooped his shoulders slightly, with silver hair and keen blue eyes that missed very little. "Tobias, you're back earlier than expected, and with a guest I see." Tobias dismounted and helped Rebecca down from Clover. "Samuel, this is Rebecca Vance. She needs a place to stay for a while, somewhere safe and out of sight. I was hoping you might have work for her." Samuel studied Rebecca for a long moment, taking in her exhausted face and frightened eyes. What kind of trouble is she in? The kind that's not her fault, the kind where staying in town might get her killed or worse. "That's a serious thing you're saying, son. I know, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it was true." Samuel nodded slowly. "All right then. I trust your judgment, Tobias. Miss Vance, welcome to the Circle H. We can always use someone who knows their way around a kitchen and can help with the mending and such. The pay is $1 a day plus room and board. The work is hard but fair. Does that suit you?" Rebecca felt tears threatening again. "Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll work as hard as I can." "I expect you will. Come on inside and I'll show you where you'll be staying. Maria, our housekeeper, will get you settled in." He paused, his expression growing stern. "One thing, Miss Vance. I don't abide lying or stealing on my ranch. I'm giving you a chance based on Tobias's word, but you step out of line even once and you'll be on your way. Clear?" "Yes, sir. Crystal clear." "Good. Let's get you fed and settled then." The room Samuel showed her to was small but comfortable, located in a wing of the main house that had been built for staff. It held a bed, a dresser, a small table with a chair, and a window that looked out over the prairie. It was more than Rebecca had hoped for, more than she felt she deserved. Maria, the housekeeper Samuel had mentioned, was a Mexican woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She brought Rebecca hot water for washing, a clean nightdress, and a plate of food that Rebecca forced herself to eat, despite her roiling stomach. "You look like you have been through the wars," Maria said as Rebecca ate. "But you are safe here. Mr. Samuel, he is a good man. And the cowboys who work here, they are decent. Not like some ranches where the men are animals. Here, we are a family of sorts." "Tobias, the man who brought me, is he decent too?" Rebecca asked, then blushed at her own boldness. Maria smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Tobias is one of the best men I know. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly. But he works harder than anyone, and he is always respectful. The other cowboys, they respect him. Even Mr. Samuel asks his opinion on things." "Why do you ask?" "He helped me today. He didn't have to, but he did." "That sounds like Tobias. He has a good heart, even though I think it has been hurt before. He does not talk about his past, but I can see the sadness in his eyes sometimes." Maria patted Rebecca's hand. "Get some sleep, child. Tomorrow will be a new day, and you will face it with a clear head." But sleep didn't come easily. Rebecca lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Horses nickering in the corrals, the low murmur of men's voices from the bunkhouse, the rustle of wind through the trees. It was so different from the silence of her old homestead, where the only sounds had been her own breathing and the heavy tread of her husband's boots when he came home drunk and angry. She thought about Tobias Hartwell and his storm-colored eyes, the way he had knelt in front of her and talked her through her panic, the way he had offered help without asking for anything in return. She thought about his words, "We'll figure it out one day at a time, together," and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that might have been hope flickering to life in her chest. One day at a time. She could manage that. Maybe. The next morning, Rebecca woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing and men moving around outside. She dressed quickly in the simple work dress Maria had provided, braided her hair, and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth. Maria was already there, stirring a massive pot of oatmeal on the stove. "Good, you are awake. Can you make biscuits?" "Yes, madam." "Then make 4 dozen. The men eat like horses. And there is bacon that needs frying and coffee to make. The cowboys come in at 6 for breakfast, so we have 30 minutes. Rebecca threw herself into the work, grateful for the familiar tasks. Her hands knew how to measure flour and knead dough, how to slice bacon, and tend to multiple pots at once. By the time the cowboys started filing into the dining hall adjacent to the kitchen, the table was laden with food and the coffee was hot and strong. Tobias was among the last to arrive, and his eyes found Rebecca immediately. He nodded to her, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and she nodded back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the heat from the stove. The cowboys ate with single-minded focus, shoveling food into their mouths and washing it down with coffee before heading out to their various tasks for the day. Rebecca and Maria cleared the table and began washing dishes, falling into an easy rhythm that made the work pass quickly. "You did well," Maria said as they finished. "The men, they will appreciate good food. It makes the hard work easier to bear. What should I do now? There is laundry that needs doing and mending, and the vegetables in the garden need picking. I will show you." The days settled into a pattern. Rebecca worked from before dawn until after dark, cooking and cleaning and mending, tending the garden, and helping Maria with the 100 tasks that kept a ranch running. The work was physically exhausting, but mentally soothing, a kind of meditation that kept her from dwelling too much on her fears. The cowboys treated her with polite respect, tipping their hats when they passed her, and thanking her for the meals. She learned their names and their quirks, learned that Billy was only 19 and homesick for his mother in Kansas, that Jack had a terrible singing voice but insisted on entertaining them anyway, that Pete was the best horseman she had ever seen, and Tobias. She was always aware of Tobias, even when he wasn't nearby. She noticed the way he gentled the horses with patient hands, the way he helped the younger cowboys without making them feel inadequate, the way his eyes scanned the horizon constantly as if watching for danger. He didn't seek her out specifically, but they fell into a habit of conversation during meals, brief exchanges about the weather or the ranch work that gradually deepened into something more personal. He told her about growing up in Louisiana, about losing everything in the war, about the years of drifting that had followed. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about the family she had lost to fever, about the loneliness that had made her accept a marriage proposal from a man she barely knew. "Do you ever regret it?" Tobias asked one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, shelling peas for the next day's dinner. "Getting married to him?" Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. "Every day. But I try to remember that I was young and alone and scared, and I made the best choice I could with what I knew at the time. I can regret the outcome without regretting the person I was who made that choice. That's a wise way of looking at it. I don't feel wise. I feel like I'm stumbling around in the dark most of the time." Tobias smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "I think that's what most of us are doing. We just get better at pretending we can see where we're going." Rebecca laughed, surprised by the sound. When was the last time she had laughed? She couldn't remember. "There it is," Tobias said softly. "I was wondering what your laugh sounded like." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I haven't had much reason to laugh lately." "Then I'll have to try to give you more reasons." It was such a simple statement, but it carried weight. A promise, perhaps. A declaration of intent. Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the interest in his eyes, the warmth that he usually kept carefully hidden. "Tobias," she said carefully, "I'm not ready for anything. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. What I went through, it changed me, broke me in ways I'm not sure can be fixed. I'm not asking for anything," he said gently. "I'm just saying that you deserve laughter and joy and all the good things life has to offer. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. And if you're never ready, I'll still be here as your friend. No pressure, no expectations, just one day at a time, remember?" "One day at a time," she echoed, feeling something settle in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust, fragile and new and precious beyond measure. October arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the beginning of the fall roundup. The ranch became a hive of activity as the cowboys worked long days gathering cattle, branding calves, and separating out the steers that would be driven to market. Rebecca saw less of Tobias during this time, as he was often out on the range from before dawn until well after dark. But when he did come in, exhausted and covered in dust, he always found her to share a few words, to check that she was all right, to remind her that she wasn't alone. These small gestures meant more to Rebecca than she could express. They were building something between them, a foundation of friendship and trust that she sensed could become more if she let it. The question was whether she was brave enough to let it. It was late October when the bounty hunters returned. Rebecca was in the garden, picking the last of the season's vegetables when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Some instinct made her freeze, made her duck down behind the tall corn stalks and peer cautiously toward the ranch yard. 3 men rode in, and even from a distance, Rebecca recognized the scarred face of the leader. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. Samuel Harrison came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Help you gentlemen with something?" "We're looking for a woman," the scarred man said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. Dark hair, green eyes, about 24 years old. Name of Rebecca Vance. "We have reason to believe she might be working at a ranch somewhere in this area." "Don't know anyone by that name," Samuel said, his tone casual. "Just me, my housekeeper, and my cowboys here. Mind if we take a look around?" "Actually, I do mind. This is private property and you're trespassing. So, unless you have a warrant from a judge, I'd appreciate it if you turned those horses around and rode back the way you came." The scarred man's expression turned ugly. "Now that's not very neighborly. We could make things difficult for you, old man." "You could try." Samuel's voice hardened. "But I should mention that every one of my cowboys is armed and within earshot, and we don't take kindly to threats on the Circle H. So, I'll ask you one more time, politely. Leave. Now." As if on cue, cowboys began appearing from various locations around the ranch, from the barn, from the corrals, from the bunkhouse. 12 men, all of them carrying rifles or with hands on their sidearms, all of them looking at the bounty hunters with expressions that promised violence if provoked. Tobias emerged from the barn last, and his eyes swept the ranch yard until they found Rebecca in the garden. Their gazes locked for a moment, and she saw the protective fury in his face, barely controlled. "This isn't over," the scarred man said, but he was already turning his horse. "That woman killed a man. She's a murderer, and we will find her." "If she killed a man, I imagine she had good reason," Samuel said coldly. "Now get off my land before I have you removed." The bounty hunters left, but the tension remained thick in the air long after they disappeared from sight. Rebecca remained frozen in the garden, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the basket of vegetables she had been holding. Tobias was suddenly there, kneeling beside her in the dirt. "Rebecca, look at me, they're gone." "They'll keep looking, they won't stop. That reward money is too much." Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "I should leave. I'm putting everyone here in danger." "You're not going anywhere," Tobias said firmly. "Those men don't scare us. We protect our own on this ranch, and you're one of ours now." Samuel approached, his face grave. "Tobias is right. You're under my protection, Miss Vance, and I don't give that lightly. Those bounty hunters can ask around all they want, but they won't find anyone on the Circle H willing to betray you." "But why?" Rebecca asked, bewildered. "Why would you risk so much for me?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Samuel said simply. "And because I've known men like your husband, men who use their fists instead of their words, men who think a marriage certificate gives them ownership of another human being. If you killed him in self-defense, then, as far as I'm concerned, you did the world a favor." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face. "I don't deserve this kindness." "That's where you're wrong," Tobias said, his hands gently gripping her shoulders. "You deserve every kindness, every good thing, every moment of peace, and I swear to you, I will do everything in my power to make sure you get those things. Do you hear me? Everything." Rebecca stared into his storm-colored eyes and saw the truth there, saw the depth of feeling he had been hiding. It terrified her. It thrilled her. It made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, but you don't have to be scared alone anymore. We'll face this together, remember? One day at a time. One day at a time," she repeated, and let him help her to her feet. That night, Samuel called a meeting of all the ranch hands. They gathered in the dining hall, curious and concerned, and Samuel laid out the situation plainly. There was a woman on the ranch, he told them, who was running from men who wanted to take her back to face charges for defending herself against a violent husband. Those men were offering a substantial reward. He would understand if any of them felt the reward was too tempting to pass up. But if so, they should leave now, and he would pay them what they were owed with no hard feelings. No one moved. "We're with you, boss," Billy said, speaking for the group, "and we're with Miss Rebecca. Anyone comes looking for her, they'll have to go through all of us." The murmur of agreement that ran through the assembled cowboys brought fresh tears to Rebecca's eyes. These rough men, these strangers who owed her nothing, were willing to stand between her and danger. It was almost more than she could comprehend. "Thank you," she managed to say. "All of you, thank you." "No thanks needed, madam," Jack said, his usually jovial face serious. "You make the best biscuits I've ever eaten. That's worth protecting right there." The tension broke with laughter, and Rebecca found herself laughing too, the sound coming easier now than it had a few weeks ago. As the meeting broke up and the cowboys filed out to return to the bunkhouse, Tobias lingered behind. "Can I walk you back to your room?" "Yes, I'd like that." They walked in comfortable silence through the quiet ranch, the night air cool against their skin. Stars blazed overhead, so many more visible here than they had been in town. A vast tapestry of light against the darkness. "I meant what I said earlier," Tobias said, as they reached the door to Rebecca's room, "about protecting you, about doing everything in my power to keep you safe. I know you did, and I'm grateful, more than I can express." "It's not about gratitude, Rebecca. I need you to understand that." He took a breath, seeming to gather his courage. "I've been alone a long time, by choice mostly. After the war, after losing everything, it seemed easier not to care too much about anything or anyone, but then you showed up, frightened and brave at the same time, and something in me recognized something in you. Two people trying to figure out how to start over. Two people carrying scars that don't show on the outside." Rebecca's breath caught. "Tobias, I can't make you any promises. I don't know what I'm capable of feeling after everything I've been through." "I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to show you that not all men are like the one you ran from. A chance to prove that you can trust again, that you can maybe even love again someday if you want to. But only when you're ready, only when it feels right to you." She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life like a guardian angel when she needed one most. "What if I'm never ready? What if I'm too broken?" "You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "And I'll wait as long as it takes. One day at a time, remember?" "One day at a time," she whispered, and before she could second-guess herself, she rose up on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you, Tobias, for everything." She slipped into her room before she could see his reaction, her heart racing. It was such a small gesture, barely a kiss at all, but it felt momentous. It felt like a door opening, just a crack, letting light into a room that had been dark for far too long. November brought the first hints of winter, cold mornings with frost on the grass, and evenings that required heavy coats. The fall roundup was complete, the cattle sold at market, and the ranch settled into the quieter rhythm of winter preparations. There was still plenty of work to be done, fences to mend, equipment to repair, but the frantic pace of autumn eased. Rebecca found herself with more free time, and she spent much of it with Tobias. They took walks around the ranch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories about his childhood in Louisiana, about sneaking away from his tutors to fish in the bayou, about his mother who had played piano, and his father who had been stern but fair. She told him about her parents, about growing up as an only child, about the loneliness that had defined so much of her life. "I always thought marriage would fix that," she admitted one evening as they sat on a fence overlooking the pasture where the horses grazed. "I thought having a husband would mean I'd never be lonely again. But I was lonelier in my marriage than I ever was before it." "Loneliness isn't about being alone," Tobias said thoughtfully. "It's about not being seen, not being known. You can be lonely in a crowd if no one really sees you." "He never saw me. He saw something he could control, something he could use. But he never saw me, who I really was." She paused, gathering her courage. "But you see me, don't you?" "Yes," Tobias said simply. "I see you. I see a woman who's stronger than she knows. I see someone who survived hell and came out the other side still able to laugh, still able to hope. I see someone beautiful and brave and worth knowing." Rebecca turned to look at him, her heart in her throat. "I'm starting to see you too. The real you, underneath the quiet cowboy exterior. I see someone who's been hurt but hasn't let it make him cruel. I see someone who's kind even when he doesn't have to be. I see someone I could maybe learn to trust, maybe even more than trust." "Rebecca," he breathed, and there was so much hope in his voice it made her chest ache. "I'm still scared," she said honestly. "Terrified, actually. But I'm also tired of letting fear control my life. I'm tired of running from anything that might be good because I'm afraid it will turn bad. So maybe we could try, slowly, one day at a time. That's all I'm asking for, one day at a time. This time when he reached for her hand, she didn't flinch. She laced her fingers through his and held on, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the calluses that spoke of hard work and honest living. It was such a simple thing, holding hands, but it felt like victory. They sat like that until the sun set and the stars came out, not speaking, just being together. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rebecca felt something that might have been peace. December arrived with a cold snap that had everyone bundling into layers and huddling close to the fireplaces. Christmas was approaching, and Maria threw herself into preparations with enthusiastic energy, baking enough cookies and cakes to feed an army. "This will be a good Christmas," Maria declared. "The best one the Circle H has seen in years. I can feel it." Rebecca found herself caught up in the preparations, despite her initial resistance. She had never enjoyed Christmas with her husband. The holiday had been just another opportunity for his drinking and violence. But here at the ranch, Christmas meant something different. It meant family, chosen if not blood. It meant warmth and laughter, and the kind of joy that came from simple pleasures. Tobias carved small wooden figurines for the children of the ranch workers who lived in cabins at the far end of the property. Rebecca knitted scarves for the cowboys, working late into the night by lamplight. Samuel ordered in supplies for a feast, determined to celebrate properly. On Christmas Eve, they all gathered in the dining hall, the table laden with more food than Rebecca had ever seen in one place. There was roasted beef and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, vegetables preserved from the garden, pies and cakes, and cookies. The cowboys ate with appreciative groans, praising Rebecca and Maria until both women blushed. After the meal, someone produced a fiddle and someone else a harmonica, and music filled the air. Some of the cowboys danced with each other, laughing at their own clumsiness. The children ran around shrieking with excitement. Samuel sat in his chair by the fire, smiling at the chaos with the contentment of a man who had built something good. Tobias appeared at Rebecca's elbow. "Dance with me?" "I don't really know how," she admitted. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." She let him lead her into the space that had been cleared for dancing, his hand warm on her waist, his other hand holding hers carefully. They swayed more than danced, finding a rhythm that worked for them, and Rebecca found herself laughing at their awkwardness. "See?" Tobias said, grinning down at her. "We're figuring it out." "One day at a time," she said, and he pulled her a little closer. One day at a time. Later that night, after the party had wound down and everyone had retreated to their beds, Tobias walked Rebecca to her room, as had become their custom. They stood outside her door, neither wanting to say goodnight. "I got you something," Tobias said, pulling a small package from his pocket. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Rebecca unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a small wooden carving of a bird in flight. It was exquisitely detailed, every feather visible, wings spread wide against the sky. "You made this?" she asked, awed. "I did. I started it back in September, after you first arrived. I wanted to make something that reminded me of you." "A bird?" "A bird flying free. That's what I thought when I first saw you. Here's someone who should be flying, who deserves to fly, but who's been caged for so long she's forgotten how. And I wanted to make you something that reminded you that you could fly again, if you chose to." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "Tobias, this is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. You deserve thoughtful gifts. You deserve everything good in this world." He hesitated, then added softly, "You deserve to be loved the way you should have been loved all along, with gentleness and respect and care." Rebecca looked up at him, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I think it's happening anyway." Tobias's face transformed with joy. "You think you could bear it if I told you I'm already in love with you? That I have been for weeks now, maybe since the first moment I saw you? How can you love me? You barely know me. I know everything that matters. I know you're kind even when you're scared. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you laugh at Jack's terrible jokes, even though they're not funny, because you don't want him to feel bad. I know you sneak extra food to the old barn cat, even though you think no one notices. I know you have nightmares sometimes, and I hear you pacing in your room at night when you can't sleep. I know you're healing, slowly but surely, and I know I want to be part of that healing if you'll let me." Rebecca reached up and cupped his face with her hands, feeling the roughness of his stubble against her palms. "I'm still scared. I'm still damaged. I still have days where I don't think I'll ever be whole again. Then we'll figure those days out together. One day at a time, Rebecca. That's all we need to do. Just take it one day at a time." She pulled his face down to hers and kissed him. Really kissed him for the first time. His lips were soft and gentle against hers, his arms coming around her carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. The kiss was sweet and tentative and full of promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Rebecca Vance. I will love you tomorrow and the day after, and every day for the rest of my life, if you'll let me." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling right in a way nothing had felt right in years. "I don't know how to do this, how to be in a relationship that's healthy, but I want to learn. With you. One day at a time." "One day at a time," he agreed, and kissed her again. January of 1879 arrived with clear blue skies and cold, crisp air. The bounty hunters had not returned, and as the weeks passed, Rebecca began to hope that they had given up, that the trail had gone cold enough that they had moved on to easier prey. She knew she might never be completely safe, that the threat could always return, but she was learning to live with that uncertainty instead of letting it paralyze her. Her relationship with Tobias deepened as winter progressed. They spent every free moment together, learning each other's rhythms and preferences, building the kind of intimacy that came from genuine caring. He was patient with her fears, never pushing, always letting her set the pace. When she had nightmares and woke screaming, he was there to sit outside her door and talk to her until she could sleep again. When she flinched away from sudden movements, he slowed down, gave her space, reminded her gently that she was safe. In return, she learned his fears too. He was terrified of caring too much and losing everything again like he had during the war. He worried that his wandering nature would resurface and he would hurt her by leaving. He carried guilt about things he had done as a soldier, actions he had taken that haunted him still. "You can't change the past," Rebecca told him one evening as they sat by the fire in the main house, alone because Samuel and Maria had gone to town. "You can only learn from it and try to be better in the present." "Is that what you tell yourself?" he asked gently. "About your husband?" "I'm trying to. Some days are easier than others. But I'm learning that guilt is a heavy burden to carry, and sometimes you have to set it down, even if you don't feel like you've earned the right to." She leaned against his shoulder, feeling his arm come around her automatically. "I killed him, Tobias. I took a life. That's something I have to live with for the rest of my days. But I'm trying to accept that it was him or me, and I chose me, and that's okay. That's survival." "I'm proud of you," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "for surviving, for being here, for being brave enough to try again. I had help. I had you. We had each other. That's how this works. Rebecca. We hold each other up. We figure things out together." February brought a surprise in the form of a letter that arrived for Samuel. He read it over breakfast, his eyebrows rising higher with each line, then looked up at Rebecca with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Miss Vance, I've received some interesting news. It seems the marshal in your hometown has closed the investigation into your husband's death. A neighbor came forward, testified that your husband was violent, that she had witnessed him beating you on multiple occasions, and that, in her opinion, you acted in self-defense. The marshal has ruled it justifiable homicide. There's no warrant for your arrest. You're free." Rebecca's fork clattered to her plate. "What? Are you certain?" "Quite certain. The letter is from a lawyer in town who handles these kinds of inquiries. He says the bounty hunters were acting without legal authority, that the reward was offered by your husband's brother, who wanted revenge, not justice. But without official charges, they have no legitimate claim. You're free, Rebecca. Completely free." Rebecca couldn't breathe. Free. The word seemed impossible, too good to be true. She looked at Tobias, saw the joy and relief on his face, and suddenly she was crying, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Tobias was there immediately, pulling her into his arms, holding her while she fell apart. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's finally over. You're safe." "I'm free," she gasped between sobs. "I can stop running. I can stop looking over my shoulder. I'm free." The other cowboys who were present for breakfast cheered and clapped, their happiness for her genuine and unrestrained. Maria was crying too, dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Samuel smiled, the expression warm and grandfatherly. "So, what will you do now?" Samuel asked when Rebecca had calmed enough to speak. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you like, of course, but you have options now. You could go anywhere, do anything." Rebecca looked at Tobias, saw the carefully hidden fear in his eyes, the worry that she would leave now that she could. She reached for his hand and squeezed it tight. "I'd like to stay," she said firmly. "If that's all right. This is home now. You're all my family, and I'm not finished figuring out how to start over yet." The relief on Tobias's face was almost comical. "You're staying?" "I'm staying. One day at a time, remember? And I'm not done with those days yet." He kissed her right there in front of everyone, and she kissed him back, not caring who saw, not caring what anyone thought. She was free, and she was home, and she was in love with a good man who loved her in return. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. Spring arrived, bringing wildflowers and new calves, longer days and the return of warmth to the land. Rebecca and Tobias spent hours riding across the ranch together, talking and laughing and falling deeper in love with each passing day. He taught her to rope and to shoot, skills she had never learned before. She taught him to cook beyond basic trail food, delighting in his surprise when he discovered he actually enjoyed baking. One evening in late April, as they sat watching the sunset from their favorite spot overlooking the pasture, Tobias turned to her with unusual solemnity. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something important." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "I know we haven't been together that long by most standards. It's only been about 6 months since you arrived at the ranch. But I feel like I've known you my entire life. Like I was waiting for you without knowing I was waiting." He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You make me want to put down roots, to build something permanent, to stop running from my past and start creating a future." "Tobias," Rebecca breathed, hardly daring to hope. "I'm not good with words, so I'm just going to say it plain. Would you marry me? Would you take a chance on a broken-down cowboy who loves you more than anything in this world? I promise I will spend every day for the rest of my life, making you happy, making you feel safe, making you know that you are cherished and valued and loved beyond measure." Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. 1,000 times, yes." He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver, with a small stone. "It's not much. I've been saving my wages, but a cowboy doesn't make a fortune." "It's perfect," Rebecca said, as he slipped it onto her finger. "Everything about this is perfect. You're perfect. I'm far from perfect, but I'm yours if you'll have me. I'll have you, one day at a time, for all the days we're given." He kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Rebecca felt complete in a way she had never felt before. She had started over, had built a new life from the ashes of the old, and it was better than anything she could have imagined. They were married in June in a small ceremony at the ranch, with all the cowboys in attendance and half the town of Fort Worth besides. Martha and George Henderson came from town, Martha crying openly as she watched Rebecca speak her vows. Samuel gave Rebecca away, his pride in her obvious. Maria fussed over Rebecca's simple blue dress like it was the finest wedding gown in all of Texas. But it was Tobias who held Rebecca's attention. Tobias with his storm-colored eyes full of love and promise. Tobias who vowed to cherish her in sickness and health, for better or worse, for all the days of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Tobias kissed her thoroughly, and the assembled guests cheered and whistled. Rebecca laughed against his lips, her heart so full of happiness she thought it might overflow. "I love you, Mrs. Hartwell," Tobias murmured. "I love you too, Mr. Hartwell, one day at a time." "One day at a time," he agreed, and kissed her again. Samuel had given them a plot of land on the edge of the ranch to build their own home, and with the help of the other cowboys, Tobias spent the summer constructing a small house. It was simple but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living area, and a porch where they could sit and watch the sunsets. Rebecca planted a garden and filled the house with curtains and quilts she sewed herself. It became their sanctuary, their little piece of paradise carved out of the Texas prairie. Their life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Tobias worked the ranch during the day, while Rebecca helped Maria at the main house and tended their home. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together, talking about their days, planning for the future. On Sundays, they rode into Fort Worth for church and to visit the Hendersons at the Mercantile. The nightmares didn't disappear completely, but they became less frequent. When Rebecca woke gasping from dreams of blood and violence, Tobias was there to hold her, to remind her where she was and that she was safe. He never complained, never made her feel like a burden. He simply loved her through the hard moments and celebrated with her during the good ones. By autumn, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Tobias one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. She needn't have worried. He let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses, swept her into his arms, and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We're going to have a baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, excited, grateful, overwhelmed, all of those things, but mostly happy. He placed his hand gently on her stomach. "We made this new life. This is our fresh start, Rebecca. Our chance to do things right, to build the kind of family we both should have had." "One day at a time," she said, placing her hand over his. "One day at a time." Their son was born in May of 1880, arriving on a warm spring morning with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire ranch. They named him James Samuel Hartwell, after Tobias's father and the man who had given them both a second chance. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and Tobias cried the first time he held his son, overwhelmed by the fierce protective love that surged through him. "He's perfect," Tobias whispered, staring down at the tiny face. "Absolutely perfect." "He is," Rebecca agreed, exhausted but happy beyond measure. "And he's ours." Watching Tobias with their son over the following months filled Rebecca with a joy she hadn't known was possible. He was a devoted father, gentle and patient, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor at night when James was fussy. He sang lullabies in his deep voice and made up silly stories that made Rebecca laugh, even when she was tired from sleepless nights. This was what family should be, she realized. This sharing of burdens and joys. This partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love. This was what she had been searching for her entire life without knowing it. Years passed in a blur of happiness. James grew into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father around the ranch like a shadow. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah, born in 1882, and another son named Michael in 1884. The little house on the edge of the Circle H ranch filled with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of a growing family. Tobias proved to be as good a father as Rebecca had known he would be. He taught their children to ride and to rope, to be kind to animals and respectful to their elders. He read to them every night before bed, his deep voice bringing stories to life. He never raised his hand to them in anger, never made them afraid. He loved them fiercely and showed it in 1,000 small ways every single day. Rebecca blossomed in motherhood, her natural nurturing instincts finally having a safe outlet. She taught Sarah to sew and cook, taught all 3 children their letters and numbers at the kitchen table. She filled their home with warmth and security, determined that they would never know the fear she had known, never doubt for a moment that they were loved and wanted. Samuel Harrison lived to see all 3 of his surrogate grandchildren born, dandling them on his knee and slipping them peppermints when their parents weren't looking. He passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1885, leaving the Circle H ranch to Tobias with the provision that he care for Maria and any of the older cowboys who wished to remain. "He always thought of you as the son he never had," Rebecca told Tobias as they stood at Samuel's grave, the children quiet and solemn beside them. "He was proud of you, of us, of what we built." "I owe him everything," Tobias said, his voice rough with emotion. "He gave me a home when I was drifting. He gave me a chance to be part of something bigger than myself. And he brought you into my life, which is the greatest gift anyone could have given me. He would want you to be happy," Rebecca said gently. "He would want us to keep building, keep growing, Keep figuring it out one day at a time. One day at a time, Tobias agreed, and they walked back to the ranch together, their children between them, the future stretching out full of possibility. Running the Circle H ranch brought new challenges and new rewards. Tobias proved to be a fair and capable owner, treating his workers with the same respect Samuel had shown. The ranch prospered under his management, growing in size and reputation. Rebecca managed the household and helped with the books, her head for numbers proving invaluable. They worked together as true partners, making decisions jointly, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating successes together. Martha and George Henderson remained close friends, visiting often and spoiling the children shamelessly. Maria stayed on at the ranch, becoming more grandmother than housekeeper to James, Sarah, and Michael. The cowboys who had stood up for Rebecca that day when the bounty hunters came looking became uncles of sorts, teaching the children and protecting them with the same fierce loyalty they had once shown Rebecca. Sometimes, lying in bed at night with Tobias's arms around her and their children sleeping safely in the next room, Rebecca thought back to that desperate woman who had stumbled into Fort Worth 7 years ago, terrified and alone and convinced she would never be whole again. She thought about the blood on her hands and the weight of guilt she had carried, about the fear that had driven every moment of every day. That woman seemed like someone from another lifetime now. Rebecca had healed, not completely. She still had scars, still had moments of fear, but enough to reclaim her life and build something beautiful from the wreckage. "What are you thinking about?" Tobias murmured sleepily, pulling her closer. "About how far we've come. About that first day when I didn't know how to start over, and you told me we'd figure it out one day at a time together." "And did we figure it out?" "We did. We're still figuring it out, actually. Every day brings something new, but we're doing it together, and that makes all the difference." Tobias pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Rebecca Hartwell. More today than yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow. I love you too. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for giving me a reason to start over. Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-down cowboy. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for these beautiful children, and this home and this happiness I never thought I'd have." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for figuring it out with me, one day at a time." "One day at a time," Rebecca whispered into the darkness, "for all the days we have left." And in the quiet of their bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, two people who had been broken found peace in each other's arms. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. James grew tall and strong like his father, taking naturally to ranch work. Sarah proved to have her mother's practical nature and her father's way with horses. Michael was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book when he wasn't being dragged outside by his siblings. In the summer of 1890, when Rebecca was 36 and Tobias was 40, they welcomed their fourth child, a daughter they named Emma. She arrived unexpectedly, a surprise that made them both laugh at the unpredictability of life. The older children adored their baby sister, fighting over who got to hold her and help care for her. "4 children," Tobias said one evening, watching his family gathered around the dinner table, everyone talking and laughing over each other. "When I was drifting after the war, if someone had told me I'd end up here, with all this, I would have thought they were crazy. When I was running from my past, if someone had told me I'd find love and happiness, I would have thought the same," Rebecca said, leaning against his shoulder. "But here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, still figuring it out, one day at a time. The turn of the century found the Hartwell family well established and prosperous. James had married a girl from town and was building his own house on Circle H land. Sarah was being courted by the son of a neighboring rancher, much to Tobias's mixed feelings about his daughter growing up. Michael had surprised everyone by announcing his intention to become a teacher, planning to attend college in the fall. Emma was growing into a bright, curious 10-year-old who reminded Rebecca of herself at that age. On a warm evening in June of 1901, Rebecca and Tobias sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Their hair had gray in it now, their faces lined with age and experience, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But their love had only deepened, growing richer and more complex with each passing year. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "Tying yourself to me, taking on my past, all the complications that came with loving me. Tobias looked at her with surprise. Not for a single second. Why would you ask that? I don't know. Sometimes I just think about how much easier your life would have been if you had chosen someone else, someone without all my baggage. My life wouldn't have been easier. It would have been emptier. You're not baggage, Rebecca. You never were. You were a gift, the greatest gift I've ever received. He took her hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on her skin. Every challenge we faced together. Every joy we experienced together. That's what marriage is, what partnership is. It's not about finding someone who makes life easy. It's about finding someone who makes life worth living, even when it's hard. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. I feel the same way. You saved my life. Tobias, not just that day when you helped me escape those bounty hunters, but every day since. You showed me what love should be, what I deserved, what was possible. You helped me figure out how to start over when I didn't think I could. We figured it out together, he corrected gently. One day at a time, just like I promised we would. One day at a time, she agreed, and leaned her head on his shoulder as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. They sat there in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other when they both needed finding, two people who had built a life and a family and a legacy from nothing but determination and love. Behind them, through the open windows, they could hear Emma practicing her piano, the notes carrying on the evening air. In the distance, they could see lights from James's house and hear the laughter of their grandchildren playing before bedtime. This was what starting over looked like, Rebecca thought. Not a dramatic transformation, but a series of small choices made day after day. A commitment to healing and growing and loving despite fear. It was choosing to trust when trust seemed impossible, to hope when hope seemed foolish, to love when love seemed like the most dangerous thing in the world. It was a cowboy with storm-colored eyes saying, "We'll figure it out one day at a time together," and meaning it with every fiber of his being. It was taking that first terrified step forward, and then the next, until suddenly you realized you were running towards something instead of away from it. It was building a home not just from wood and nails, but from patience and kindness, and the determined belief that broken things could be made whole. As the stars began to appear overhead and the night sounds of the ranch rose around them, Rebecca Hartwell smiled. She had been broken once, shattered into pieces by violence and fear. But she had been put back together with love, stronger at the broken places, more beautiful for having survived. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. None of us ever do. But she knew she would face it with Tobias beside her, with their children and grandchildren around them, with the life they had built standing as testament to the power of second chances. One day at a time. That's all anyone needed. One day at a time, together. And that was more than enough. The end.